Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back. Brandon again. Today, I want to talk about some things that I would try to tell my younger self if I had the opportunity to go back in time to the early to mid 1990s and give myself some lifting and training advice. Now, as part of this, I want to say that it's just advice and it's not necessarily mistakes or regrets that I have, because in reality, I know if I did go back in time to tell myself these things, the prepubescent teen version of myself would probably not take myself too seriously or believe that it was actually me from the future, because who could believe that a kid that looked this great with hair would ever lose it at such an early and ripe age. But it's really similar to, if you remember Back to the Future 2, where a future Biff goes back in time, gives younger Biff the sports almanac, and he doesn't really know what he has in his hands. I think that's the same thing, because oftentimes a lot of these lessons that I've learned the hard way, which is the best way to ingrain them into your daily routines, is you live through them and find out what works or what doesn't work. So again, this is just some general advice that might be able to help you if you're in that same situation or considering what you're doing. And the first thing is around my training protocols. I would like to have had a more open mind when it comes to training, meaning I would like to get into some freaky stuff. I say that because when I first started lifting, I really only did chest and arm work. So bench press, barbell curls, maybe some dumbbell curls, and some tricep push downs. Literally, that's all I did. I had access to a full gym with squat racks, with back machines, with everything you can imagine. And I predominantly stayed in the chest and arm region going for that pump. And while at the time it was very fruitful, I bench press started to increase, my arms got a little bit bigger, and those were the only things I really cared about at the time, so life was good. But I look at it as really kind of squandering my prime years of noob gains, meaning that I should have been spending time deadlifting and squatting in order to build up my base. That way, in the future, when I wanted to get into specifics or train specifically for powerlifting or weightlifting or wherever my given path would be, I would have a solid foundation to go off of. So even though I've been training for about 20 years, I've only really been squatting consistently for 10 and deadlifting for probably 8. So it's one of those things where a lot of my training history, I think, could have been better utilized. And I think if I was younger and was able to get in at the ground level, I would have been able to kind of find my niche, so to say, and also really experiment. Whereas now I'm kind of ingrained in this powerlifting mentality where I don't really want to get into weightlifting. I don't want to get into other disciplines necessarily. I've kind of picked my path, but it would have been nice to get a lot of that out and really found what I was good at when I was younger. Now, it's not to say that I would have told myself you need to go on this program or hire this coach, because again, in reality, I don't think that's very applicable. I don't think I would have stuck to a program that was that specific, and I didn't have the money to hire a coach. So just in general, I wish I could have taken advantage of the opportunity a little bit better to play around and get a little weird with the weights, if you will. The next thing I want to talk about comes around diet. So growing up, like most people, especially if you were active in sports and things, or if you're a taller individual, you probably considered yourself a hard gainer, as did I. I thought I was eating everything under the sun, and no matter what I did, I just couldn't gain weight. Now, given my fast metabolism at that age, when you're going through a lot of weird growth stuff, you know what I'm talking about, and playing sports, just burning a ton of calories. And again, I don't necessarily think I should have tracked macros, although that might have helped. I don't think I would have been consistent at doing so, but I just wish in general I would have eaten to grow, and I'm going to put it at that. So eat to the point where you're able to gain weight and put weight on, and again, couple that with having a more rounded training routine. I think I would have seen a lot of benefit, and again, set myself up for a lot of future endeavors by building a very strong base and foundation. So I wish I had a better understanding, but not specific to the point where I start to have issues with food and tracking and wanting to eat stuff and not other stuff. So just more overall intake to grow. The last thing I want to talk about is just generally taking advice. And I kind of touched upon this in the beginning. I just wish I'd spent more time talking to people who were at where I wanted to be. I'm not talking about unsolicited gym advice, because that never goes over very well. But again, at the time of me training, there wasn't as much free information readily available as it is today, meaning I got a lot of my information from things like Arnold Schwarzenegger's Modern Encyclopedia of Bodybuilding, all of the bodybuilding magazines that were out there. And although this was information, it wasn't great information. And again, I didn't have, someone that was a power lifter to talk to at the time. I didn't have a professional bodybuilder in my gym to talk to. A lot of the stuff that I found out was just through what I could get my hands on in my own research. A lot of it was not accurate or was outdated. but it was what I had at the time. You could also rely on people at GNC when it came to supplementation. Literally, that was the only real source of knowledge that I had access to when I was in high school. And as we all know, they don't really give reliable information either. So it was really tough. So I wish I could have found more people who were interested in what I was interested in and connect with them. Now I know what you're thinking. Why didn't you just go online to YouTube or whatever the case may be? And the internet, sadly, was not really where it was back then. I remember when we first got, AOL Instant Messenger, and that was a huge thing. And eventually these websites did start to pop up. So I did spend a lot of time on the bodybuilding.com forums talking to people, which is interesting because I go back and I can see some very early conversations with Straight Flexed, which just so happens to be Lane Norton now. And even people like Nick Wright and some other people like Derek Charbalos, who is the founder of PR Breaker and Materia. I'm trying to butcher your last name, Derek. I'm sorry. But I've had all these interactions with people, and that was more towards the beginning of college. So even then, it was still a little bit behind the curve, and I had already been training for a while. So the internet wasn't as readily available as it is today, and there's a ton of great stuff out there, a lot of iffy stuff as well. But if I had the opportunity, I would have tried to make more connections back then as best as I could. Again, being a young teenager interested in lifting, I wasn't necessarily looking for an older mentor because that's a little bit creepy and or weird, which means I mentioned weird in all three of these things that I wish I could go back and give myself some insight on, which is another interesting thing to consider. So those are the three things that I would really like to have told my younger self. Have more training viability when it comes to just looking at programming and exercising, eat more to grow, and just connect with more people and have more open discussions to learn as much as possible. Hopefully that helps some of you if you're in the early or novice training stages yourself. In the meantime, as always, thanks for watching and stay big.